In this lesson, we'll create some underwater bubbles using the standard particle emitter, cloner object, and volume. We'll then cache the bubbles out to Alembic, which will allow us to easily offset the start time of the bubble animation. Alright, let's go ahead and make some bubbles. So I'm going to start off the fresh new scene. I'm going to go up to the Simulate menu, and let's go down to Particles and grab an emitter. Let's go ahead and move in closer. We press play to see if the particles are emitting, but they're going sideways. We don't want that. We want this to emit going up. So press stop. And with the emitter selected, we can go to the coordinate tab, and let's go ahead and rotate this for the pitch here to 90 degrees. And that'll point the emitter up. Let's just confirm that particles are flowing up, and they are. Now let's go to the particle tab. Let's change some of these settings. Let's increase the amount of particles being emitted here in the birth rate editor to be 30. And as a general rule, you want to match the birth rate renderer to the birth rate editor. The amount of particles we see in the viewport has to do with this birth rate editor, and what we see in the renderer has to do with this. So if we have different numbers, you're going to see different results when we render this out. So just match this up and you'll be okay. Now let's go down to stop emission. This emitter is set to stop emitting at 150 frames. I want to bump this up to 600 frames. Now I'm choosing 600 frames because our reef scene is 500 frames, and we need a few extra frames because we're going to bake the animation out, and those extra frames are going to help us offset the animation. Let's also change this timeline to reflect that. So let's change this to 600 frames and double click on the timeline bar, and that'll extend it. Let's go to the lifetime parameter. The particles are set to die off at 600 frames. We want to bump this down a bit, so let's go to 35 frames. So this means that the particles only live for 35 frames. So if we play this back, they will no longer live forever. They'll die off. So that's looking good. They're emitting out pretty slow right now, so let's increase the speed to about 250 centimeters. And let's increase the variation to be around 80. That way they all come out at different speeds. So let's play this back. And you can see that there's some randomization here as they come out. Much better. Alright, let's add some turbulence to these particles. Let's go up to the Simulate menu, go down to Forces, and select Turbulence. Let's increase the strength of the turbulence to be around 50. And let's go ahead and play this back, and we should have something that looks much better. Okay, let's press stop. Let's go ahead and bring in a sphere into the scene, which will act as a bubble. So go up to the Primitive menu and grab a sphere. And let's bring the radius down of the sphere to be around 20 centimeters. Alright, that looks pretty good there. Let's also select a cloner object. Let's select this icon here. I'm going to use a cloner to clone the spheres along the emitter, because with the cloner we can utilize the MoGraph effectors to further tweak the look of the bubbles themselves. Go ahead and bring the sphere inside the cloner, and let's call the cloner large bubbles. And with the cloner selected, we can go down to the object tab and change the mode from linear over to object. And let's go ahead and grab the emitter and drop that inside the object field here. And now we have all our spheres being cloned out. Let's press play, make sure everything works fine, and it does. Now let's assign a plane effector to control the scale of the spheres. So make sure that the cloner is selected, and let's go into the MoGraph menu and grab a plane effector. You'll notice that it jumped, and that's because under the parameter tab for the plane effector, the position is on. So let's turn that off, and let's turn on the scale. Now if you don't see anything happening to the cloner, make sure that the plane effector was assigned. If it wasn't, just select the cloner and go into the effectors tab, and make sure that you can click and drag that plane effector into the effectors field, and then it'll be affecting the cloner. Alright, so let's go ahead and go back to the plane effector, and under the parameter tab for scale, let's go ahead and tweak this a bit. So for the scale Z, I'm going to increase this to about 0.40. I want to give these bubbles more of this egg shape. I don't want them to be perfectly round. Let's also increase the scale for the Y just a little bit. Okay, that looks better, much better. Let's go ahead and select the cloner again. And let's go up to the MoGraph menu and let's bring in a random effector. This will give us a little bit of randomization. We don't want the position on. We want scale to be on. And this time let's go down to uniform scale. And let's start to scale this down a bit. If you notice, if we start to go around negative 0.90, I'm going to select this, 0.90. Here we get some randomization for the scale. So let's play this back. It might be a little bit too much. Let's go ahead and dial this down just a little bit more, around 0.6. Should be better. Okay, that looks better. I want to increase the width of the emitter, so let's select the emitter. Go to the emitter tab, and for the Y size, let's bring this up to about 250 centimeters. Let's play this back now. And that looks better. They were a little bit too tight there, so This gives us a little more breathing room. All right, let's press stop. And let's add some more particles to this. So we're going to do that by duplicating our cloner. Let's grab the cloner and press Control, click and drag, and go ahead and change the name of this to be small bubbles and get rid of the 0.1 at the end. And we need to assign this small bubbles cloner a new emitter. So let's duplicate this emitter. First we'll name this one large bubbles emitter. And then Control, click and drag the emitter to create a new one. And let's just name this small bubble emitter. Let's get rid of the 1 at the end. Let's select the small bubbles cloner and go in the object tab, and we need to swap out this large bubble emitter here with the new small bubble emitter. So we'll swap those out. And let's jump into the effectors tab and let's get rid of the plane effector and the random effector for the small bubble cloner. Okay, there's not much happening here, and that's because the emitter itself, we need to change the seed of it. It's in the same position as a large bubble, so let's go ahead and change the seed to be 1. And let's press play and see what happens. Okay, now we have a lot more particles and they're in a different position. So let's assign this small bubble cloner a new plane effector. Let's go up to the MoGraph menu and grab a plane effector. We'll call this plane effector small plane. And in the parameter tab for this, let's deselect position, select scale. We'll click on uniform scale and then we'll scale these down. So you can see which ones are the small ones as we're scaling these down. And now I want to give these a little bit more randomization across the board, so we'll add a random effector for the small bubble cloner. So let's select the small bubbles and let's go up to our MoGraph menu once again and grab a random effector. And we'll call this one small random. Let's go down and deselect the position under the parameter tab and let's turn on scale for this one also. And go down to uniform scale again and give this some variation, just slightly. All right, let's play this back. That's starting to look a lot better now. Okay. Let's move on with adding a volume for our large bubbles here to make these into little globs. So let's select our large bubble cloner. Let's hold down the Alt key and let's go up to our volume menu. And with the Alt key selected, that'll make it a child of the volume builder. You can see we have voxels that are being created. So let's go ahead and mesh this out. So with the volume builder selected, let's go up to the volume menu now and grab a volume mesher. Hold on the Alt key while you do this so you can make it a child of the volume mesher. Now we have these globs that are forming out of our bubbles. So let's press play and see what this looks like. We have to dial down the amount of voxels here that we have. So let's grab the volume builder. And let's bring this down to about 5 centimeters. This will tighten things up a bit. Let's play this back. So we should start getting this really cool result. As you can see, some of these bubbles are just coming in together and then they're coming apart. So that's looking nice. All right, so from here, we need to figure out a way to speed this up. If I start pressing play here, we have a slight lag. So we can speed this up by just baking this down to be an Alembic file. So what the Alembic does is it'll bake this out to an external cache file, and it'll just play this back a lot faster. And the Alembic file will also give us a parameter that'll help us offset the animation a bit, just to give us some further randomization. So let's set this up. We need a connect object to do this. So let's go up to our generator menu and grab a connect object. Let's call this connect object large bubble connect. Let's make another one for the small bubbles. So we'll call this one small bubble connect, and let's get rid of this 0.1 at the end. Now it's really important to have this naming convention because when we export this out, the Alembic file will have this naming convention, so it'll just be a lot easier for us to find it. Let's go down to our volume mesher and also rename this while we're here. We'll call this large bubbles and we'll call it mesher. Let's go ahead and link our large bubbles to the large bubble connect object. So let's select the large bubble connect object. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the large bubble mesher and bring it into the objects field of the connect object. Let's make sure that this weld option is turned off. We don't need that. Let's grab the small bubble connect and let's click and drag the small bubble cloner inside this objects field. Let's make sure that this weld option is off. By turning this off, it'll make the Alembic file a little bit smaller and it won't mess with trying to connect points at all. So a really cool thing about these connect objects is that, yes, we need them to export our cloner and our mesher out to an Alembic file, but also the result of the small bubbles and the large mesher are being ported through these connect objects. So what do I mean by that? Let's say I wanted to add a little bit more randomization to the large bubbles. Let's select the large bubble connect object. Let's go to our deformer menu and let's grab a displacer deformer. I'm going to hold down the shift key to add it as a child. And then I'm going to go to the shading tab and let's grab a noise shader. As you can see, we're having that displacer affect our bubbles even though it's inside the connect object. And that, again, is because the mesher, the large bubble mesher, is flowing through the connect object. So everything's happening up here now. So that's pretty cool. So what we can do is, with the displacer selected in the shading tab, let's go in the noise shader, and then let's give this some animation speed. Bring this up to about 5. Let's bring the global scale up to about 300. And now we have more randomization along each bubble. So let's play this back. It's going to look a little bit better now. As you can see now, it's starting to wobble through. That's looking really nice. So that's pretty cool. Let's also do that to the smaller particles. So let's just control click and drag this displacer to make a duplicate and bring it inside the small bubble connect object. And let's press play. We might need to change some of these settings here. Yeah, it's a little bit too much. These particles are a lot smaller, so let's grab the displacer. Let's go inside the noise shader and let's bring this global scale down just a little bit, 200%. And let's select the displacer again for the small bubble connect, and let's go under the object tab and let's bring the strength down to about 50%. Let's play this back. Okay, and that looks a little better. They're not disappearing. Perfect. So let's go ahead and wrap this up here. I'm going to organize this just a little bit more just to have our bubble rig organized a little bit better. So I'm going to grab all the effectors and also the small bubbles and the large bubble mesher. And I'm going to press Alt-G to group these. I'm going to call this generator. Let's also bring in this turbulence object inside the generator. Click and drag it inside. And this is a little easier to look at here. You can also grab these emitters and also put these inside the generator. So now all we have are our connect objects showing. It's a lot cleaner in here. And let's bake this out. And before we bake this out, let's go ahead and save this scene out. This is important because wherever we save it out is where we're going to cache this out to automatically. So we'll call this bubbles. And just press enter. And now since we saved it into the directory, once we bake these out, the Alembic file will also be stored in that same directory. So let's select both the small bubble connect and the large bubble connect. Right click and go down to bake as Alembic. Okay, it'll take it a second to go through these. I'm going to pause this while it does that. Alright, so we finished baking and we can go ahead and open up our cache files here. We can just drag these out and let's just make sure that these work. I'm going to just go ahead and, for now, since our file is saved, I'm just going to get rid of everything except for our Alembic cache. So you can see that it does work. Perfectly works. Alright, so let's group these together. Press Alt-G and call this bubbles. And let's copy this. Press Control-C and let's go into our reef scene. Let's go ahead and paste this into the scene. And click on our viewport and just press Control-V, paste it in. Let's move this back a bit. Let's see what we have here. I'm just going to put this, for now, temporarily. We don't have a camera set up yet, but I'm just going to place this in the scene. And let's press play. This might be a little bit slow, so let's go into our layers tab. Let's actually turn off the generator and animation here. And let's press play again. You can see these being generated. That looks really awesome. Alright, so what's cool about the Alembic cache is that we can go into our Alembic files here and select them. Let's go into the Attributes tab, and we have this offset setting here. We can go ahead and dial this down to about -40, and now when we're at frame 0, we actually have this start position instead of starting from nothing. So we start from there, and we can duplicate these out now. So I'm going to control click and drag in here, and we can give this new one a different start position. So let's select both of these again. Maybe we want to start at -50 frames. So that's going to randomize that one a bit. Let's move this to the back. Somewhere around here. Our camera's going to be somewhere here once we set it up, so let's just put it here in our view. And then let's go ahead and make another one. Control click and drag our bubbles group. And make sure we grab our bubbles there. Bring this to the side. Maybe a little further back. And let's give this one a different offset. Select both of the Alembic files and let's set this to be -20. Let's do one more. Control click and drag that one out and bring this to the front. Maybe around. And let's give this one a different offset as well. Let's do the -45. Alright. Cool. Once we have our bubble shader on there, it's going to look a lot better. But for now, let's play this through. Make sure it looks good. And there's our bubbles. I'm going to go ahead and put these bubbles all in their own layer. That way we just stay on top of our organization. It's pretty important. Let's go into the Layers tab. And I'm going to go ahead and middle click all of these here, the bubbles. And then go down to Layers. Let's create a new layer from Object Selection and call this Bubbles. You can also change the color here, the icon, to something different. We have too many greens in here, so that looks good. Alright, perfect. In this lesson, we learned how to create some underwater bubbles using a standard particle emitter, a cloner object, and volume. In the next lesson, we'll create a simple rig to animate fish for the scene.